The truth behind sustainable city logistics. Where is the real progress made? And we will hear thoughts of our experts. Pawel Kuncicki, country manager at Bolt, Phill Davies, co-founder and commercial director at MagWay, Antonios Tsiligiannis, project manager at POLIS network, and the panel discussion moderator, Sebastian Rath, associate director, climate and sustainability in insurance at Boston Consulting Group. So our stage is ready for the panelists, so please give them a very warm welcome. I will take care of it. Okay, gentlemen, the stage is yours.
Thank you for your kind introduction. So indeed, this panel will teach you all about sustainable city logistics. It's a fantastic topic to be having. So let's dive straight in. From my angle, it's a fascinating field because I tend to work with investors looking at cities as the place where, that's my moment of truth for you, where we will be living in the future. More than 50% of us, 2050, will live in cities. So there's a lot of things that need to happen to make that more efficient, more sustainable. Not only net zero. So with me, I have Pawel. So I think you are the country manager of Bolt. We heard that. You got inspired through different phases in your career and mobility. What's your moment of truth, Pawel, just to kick it off?
Well, so I'm coming to this topic from the perspective of a private sector. One of the most important things about the building of sustainable cities is, I think, a collaboration between private sector and the public sector. In our case, one of the products, one of the services that we offer is micromobility. So e-scooters, e-bikes, shared mobility. And we believe and we know that it contributes to the sustainable city transportation, but it is not possible to build a sustainable transportation system if we do not work with cities. So historically, when it wasn't, we were not the pioneers in this industry, but some other players started e-scooters and e-bikes. And the very, very early stage, the companies were launching without absolutely, with no regulations, without working with city authorities. So it created a lot of mess and also a lot of backlash from the public authorities, from city governments, which is absolutely understandable. And only a few years later, when we were launching, anytime we launch a new city, we do it in a very close collaboration with city authorities. We have huge expertise in actually working with cities, which is then helping us become this part of multimodal city transportation, and this helps the local governments build this sustainable logistics in those cities, because, well, I'm mentioning e-scooters, e-bikes. We also have ride-hailing, which is quite important. Those services integrate together with the city transportation. So yes, so I would say the most important thing, one of the most important aspects of it is that it has to happen in a very close collaboration, very productive collaboration between public and private sector.
Thanks, Pawel. So I think this is a fantastic example of micromobility, next to which we have Phill, adding a totally different dimension, because what you're offering is essentially a transportation logistics solution for big cities, with a particular spin on it. So let me have you hand over and to present.
So I'm the co-founder of MagWay, and we're effectively reimagining the conveyor belt. So we've got a solution which is an electromagnetic conveyor for moving goods. We use less than 80% of the energy to move the same mass of goods. And we started in urban logistics, and we've, to some extent, refined our proposition. So we don't expect to see a MagWay in an urban environment for quite some time. But we're focusing on our initial systems within construction, within mining, within port environments, so we can de-risk that technology, because we're aware that the future of cities has to be different if we're going to achieve our sustainability goals. So we need to be able to de-risk our solution in anticipation of incorporating MagWay as part of the solution. We see it as an intermodal, multifaceted approach with government and with private sector to achieve those goals, and focusing on the citizens within the cities as opposed to just the cities and the built environment. So a more holistic approach to the future of cities.
So very fascinating additional contribution which the future city will need. So very interested to dive deeper into this in a second. So next to me you have Antonis, which I think you have the most holistic view on this as a whole, because I think you're advising the master plans of cities, which you did with many different ones. So let us hear from you, what's your sort of latest view on this city and how it's operating from your practical applications?
Well, I mean, I'd say that there are 3 levels, basically. The first thing that we need to keep in mind is that we are at the crossroads, let's say, of human history. We have this existential threat that is the climate crisis. It's no longer climate change, it's a crisis. And we need to tackle it. And when we look at the main responsibilities that we have is to tackle the greenhouse emissions. Now, 1/5 of them in Europe last year were related to mobility in cities and metropolitan areas. And out of that 1/5, 1/4 was related to city logistics. Now, if that seems little because it's just 5%, you need to take into account that it's more than the greenhouse emissions of all the aviation sector altogether, or it's equivalent to 1/5 of what every building and every construction site in Europe is emitting. So it's a huge dimension, it's a huge challenge, but at the same time, as I said, we are at the crossroads where the capacity that we have in terms of technological advances is huge. We no longer need to think as we used to, like 100 years ago or 50 years ago or even 10 years ago. We have lots of solutions. We have the aid of technology. We have very smart people and institutions that are capable of advancing these ideas and materialize them into something concrete. And this is where it becomes complicated, because when we go to the city or the regional or the metropolitan scale, the level of complexity and the multitude of actors and governance levels and policies and all the things assorted to how a city functions is where we need to do more, because that's where we would need to focus now after a certain point, because no matter how much we reach a technological level of readiness, we still need to be able to implement all these things in the best way possible.
So I think for the audience, I think you now know where we're coming from with the 3 different perspectives, right? Let's proceed on a sort of very structural way to understand, how you will be shaping the future. Because from my angle, when I'm working with big investors, they say like, okay, I need to understand the business case. How do they really provide solutions? And they surely can't have figured it out already, because otherwise I would have been investing in them already. So where is still the barriers? So that's a little bit the kind of discussion that we aim for, to sort of dive one very short, quick round back to your vision, to sort of crystallize what does it really mean for you in the sort of next 2 years, right? Very practically, right? A bit open to sort of understand better where you're headed. And then we'll go more into how does the solution really work, right? And then we'll engage with you a bit on the sort of barriers, because obviously, the sky is the limit, but there is very, very tangible things that hold us back from reaching the sky every day. So I'll do the quick round again in the same order of sequence, simply because it makes it more memorable. Pawel, your vision. Just share a bit more with us.
So our vision as a company is to contribute to building cities that are made for people, not for cars. And this is where obviously micromobility plays a very significant thing. Like I said, we represent the private sector, which has its limitations, but it also has quite a lot of benefits, such as scalability, and product adoption is typically much faster than it is in the public sector. Sorry. So so I think our vision can be summarized as a private sector, we contribute to building cities for people, not for cars. And obviously, we also represent ride-hailing, which, well, this is cars, so you might be asking why, what role ride-hailing is playing here. But ride-hailing is contributing from a few very interesting angles to building more sustainable cities. So, for example, there was a study done, I think in Boston, but then it was repeated also in Warsaw and Krakow, about 25 to 30% of traffic in city centers are cars that are looking for parking spots. So, well, taxis or ride-hailing don't need a parking spot because, well, it's not your car, so you don't have to park. So just by switching from a private car to a shared car, to a taxi or ride-hailing car, we're reducing this traffic by 25 to 30, up to 30%. I think I mentioned Boston because I think in Boston it was ridiculous. It was like 40%. It was just cars looking for a parking spot. So this is one of the ways. The second way is that a lot of drivers currently are making the choices when they choose a car, which vehicle to invest in, which vehicle to buy. They look at those vehicles economically, and so it happens that cars, the most economically viable cars for those drivers are currently hybrid cars, especially in Poland. And already now we're hitting a point when electric cars are becoming more economically viable than hybrid cars or internal combustion engine cars. So this is also speeding up the electrification of the fleet and moving to more sustainable cars. So yeah, this is how this is our vision, and this is how we contribute to building more sustainable cities.
And if you understand it correctly, efficiency is the core of Phil's solution there as well. So tell us about the conveyor belt and the efficiency and the vision.
So our vision is to decarbonize supply chains. We see a lot of waste and inefficiency and unsustainability in the system at the moment. So our core technology is electromagnetic propulsion and control. So we have a lot of complex algorithms and software and underneath and mathematics that interact with our software, our patented software. In order to achieve a green transition, we're going to have to move over 3 gigatons of dirt every year, and that generates over 3 billion tons of carbon for every mile that's moved. And we can use less than 8% of the energy to do the same. So we mount a permanent magnet on a universal chassis, we create a controlled magnetic wave, and our system surfs that magnetic wave. The go-to-market strategy, as I've said, is initially to de-risk the system, so they're small systems on private client sites, within ports, within mines, within construction companies, and we're already working with them. We have all of those elements operating within our test facility currently, so we can move 250 kilos horizontally and vertically. And the next step is to prove that technology in a live environment. So the initial systems will be short systems, costing anywhere from £1.5 million up, $1.8 million. And then we can extend it as a scalable modular solution. So then we can build larger, longer systems for different applications, servicing the likes of airports and resorts, and eventually start looking at urban logistics, where we run the systems alongside existing thoroughfares like roads, rail, and canals, where we deliver into consolidation centres, moving so there's fewer movements of those goods and more efficient movement of those goods, because over 50% of movements, certainly in the UK currently, is empty loads. It's empty space. Vehicles are just moving air around the country.
Very clear. Thanks, Phill. Antonis, I mean, our topic is real progress, right? If you look at the city and our other two panelists, what's your thinking on real progress in the discussion that you're having?
Okay, I'll start from what is happening right now and what we can tangibly see. So POLIS is a network of cities and regions across the European Union. So these are our members, these are our key stakeholders, and we work with them. But a large part of our activities are EU-funded projects, especially the Horizon projects that focus on research, development, and innovation. So we have, for example, a project that is called Urbane, and that looks into last mile deliveries with automated vehicles, urban freight moved on trams, on city trams, even drones. We have another project at larger scale with medium-sized trucks. So it develops new components and powertrains for electric trucks. And we have another project, which is called Escalate, that looks into heavy-duty vehicles for intercity or even transnational movement of freight using both electric trucks and hydrogen-powered trucks. Now, all this is good. So we can come back to our cities and say, listen, these are the technologies that are being developed. We're going to have developments there, prepare for what's happening. But that's when things get complicated because, first of all, it's not only those. There are a multitude of technologies and more are coming. The main issue is to, let's say, escape a level of sectorialism, especially present in the public sector, where public services and public entities need to be able to discuss openly with the private sector, need to discuss, first of all, openly between them. We notice, for example, that the authorities that draft the sustainable urban mobility plans, or even better, the sustainable urban logistic plans, even though they have ambitions, they sometimes never talk, for example, to the energy department. So how are you going to implement, let's say, a shift towards electric trucks and electromobility if you are not aware of what's happening in the energy sector and in the electricity sector? Or, for example, we're talking about fleet management and more efficient last mile deliveries, but at the same time, there is no, let's say, consideration when it comes to land use planning. So where are you going to put your consolidation centers? How are you going to shape the city spatially so that it can basically have as an input these new systems that are going to be implemented?
Yeah, so we will definitely hold that thought, Antonis, because that's crucial. I think there's going to be more alignment needed across sectors and certainly also with government initiatives to bring the benefit of everything truly together. So I think in the spirit of that conversation, which we try to line out, let's definitely talk about the impact part and then come back to the barrier parts, right? So as we try to impress others with what we do, how do we describe and really tangibly measure impact, right? So Phill, I think we'll start with you because, I mean, you're setting out with the sort of next pitch for the big live demonstration. What is impact measurement for you then? What will it crystallize? How do you sort of think about that and how do you deliver it?
Well, one of the projects we're looking at is a large constructions project. And we position MagWay as a semi-permanent installation. So you can put it in for the duration of a project. You can move whatever you're moving, in this case, a lot of soil. At the end of the project, you can basically wash it down, pick it up and move it elsewhere. That project, and the expectation is they will burn, I think, 7 million tons of diesel. So we're entirely powered by renewable energy. So we're avoiding, so in terms of impact, we're talking about less energy use and more sustainable energy use. And our vision in terms of urban logistics is about removing vehicles on the road, and hence you can think about urban planning on a much more holistic basis, where you don't have these heavy vehicles moving goods between cities, between warehouses and consolidation centers. So each MagWay system can remove or can move the equivalent of 3,000 vehicles worth of goods through its system. So that's 3,000 less journeys on the roads every day.
So listening to Phill, my thought is before we go to Pawel, let's just check in with you to sort of say, is it easy for cities to follow that kind of measurement, and what's easy for them, and what's more cumbersome, or what's kind of holding them back to sort of accumulate and tick the box to say, hey, we've improved here and there, but we don't really know what's happening on the other side. How do cities sort of cope with that? interesting challenge.
It's tough. I mean, it's not easy. I would say that the most aware cities or the most developed cities are quite good at attracting funds, either public or private, either from the European Union, their nation states, or the public sector or the private sector. The thing is that attracting funds is good and all, but you need to see what you're going to do with them, and if the system that you have chosen is good, and why limit yourself to just one system when you can combine many of them in the best way possible. So what we're trying to help them with is to actually look at the bigger picture, understand that they have a multitude of tools, that we are probably in the luckiest moment in history where we can choose from a multiple variety of tools for various uses, that these are not single use and to be used in a single way, that they have to adapt them to their territory and to their specificities. And in order to do that, that's where they need to overcome the barrier, is to keep an open mind and to literally implement this cross-sectoral cooperation and way of thinking, because we're talking, for example, about intermodality and intermodal transports and freight, but in most of the cases it's a catchphrase. I mean, in order to actually achieve that, you need to get out of your office and basically talk to other people in order to properly have intermodality. We talk about plans, for example, but unfortunately, a recent research that was done on sustainable urban mobility plans showed that most of them cannot live up to their own expectations. So we need to be a bit more realistic, and in order to be a bit more realistic and creative, we need to be able to cooperate with everyone else, because city logistics, it's not just an issue for truckers or logistics companies, etc. It's something that affects the whole city. So you need to see it from a public space perspective, an energy perspective, a logistics perspective, a mobility perspective. And in order to do this, you need to cooperate.
So now you know why I like this panel, right? Because I can now check it in with Bolt and sort of say, look, I mean, you're up and running for a couple of years, right? And you have scaled in different regions. So, how do you measure impact, and, how do you also sort of move from one stage to sort of deliver more impact and sort of retire some ideas and sort of pivot forward?
Sure. So, well, the measurement is actually not that easy, right? We would love to have all the possible data. I can tell you what would be the absolutely ideal way of measuring our impact. We would take total number of trips, any type of trips in a given city, in a given market, and then look at how many of those trips are done through a sustainable way, which would be walking, cycling, e-mobility, public transport, or electric cars. Well, you can imagine we obviously don't have this data. We are not able to count every time somebody walks between their home. However, we're able to use some pretty good estimates, and then based on those estimates, then looking also at our market share and our impact, we can say, okay, in this city, before services like ours were launched, we had that many trips done by sustainable means of transport, and now we see that this is really shifting. So that would be impact of, well, not only us, but also other players on the market, how we're contributing to making as many trips possible sustainable. And a good example of e-mobility would be, let's say 5 years ago you would drive to a store to pick up something. Right now you take an e-scooter, which is much smaller. It's a shared mobility. It's electric, so it doesn't have any emissions. So we're looking at this shift over time. Then obviously, again, it has its limitations because this data is not perfect. It's not available. It's based on some rough estimates. So we're looking at some supporting metrics that are showing us how what sort of impact we're having, and those are metrics that we can fully control. So, for example, we will look at how many users of ride-hailing, how many of them are using e-mobility as well. So this would be a proportion of users who are already within our ecosystem, who are using multimodality. and are using different means of transport. We've done a couple of surveys, and we also see that with e-mobility, up to 40% of those trips are actually trips which are part of a longer journey. So that would be a shorter, this sort of last mile or first mile. You're going to a transport hub, to a train station, to a bus stop, to a tram stop, and in some cities, up to 40% of trips are happening because of that. So those would be sort of proxies that we're using to estimate the impact. Obviously, percentage of trips in ride-hailing that are done by low-emission vehicles or zero-emission or low-emission vehicles. This is also something that we're looking at. So. Yeah, there are some ways of estimating our impact or looking at metrics that we fully control, but again, it's still imperfect. We have to use what is available. And maybe one last thought. What we're seeing when we work with different cities is that the awareness of those metrics in different cities varies a lot across different markets. There will be cities that have amazing public data that can be collected, for example, about public transport, and this is something we can access and we can, almost on a weekly basis analyze how things are developing. And there's other cities that have almost no data that can be used to estimate this impact. So obviously, it's all moving to the right direction, but now we see that the differences between those cities can be huge.
So, dear panel, I think we had one additional dimension to cover, which is barriers that we have, right? And we do have to allow for enough audience interaction to ask you a lot of questions. So I will play the ball back, catching on to you, Pawel, and then you roll a ball back in my direction here. On barriers, I mean, on the one hand, the globe tells us we need to become more circular, right? Or we need to repair more and all of these upgrading kind of things. Where are the barriers where you don't stop, but where you realistically can engage to really move forward on those, and sort of what can we do to overcome, to really scale better and achieve the sort of visions that we have?
For us, one of those barriers is regulation, or let's say collaboration with city authorities. Like I said about the data, there's different levels of maturity when it comes to data collection and data analysis in different cities. There's also different levels of maturity when it comes to collaborating between public and private sector, and also understanding the needs of sustainable development. So for us, this right now is one of the biggest barriers. We're obviously doing a lot of work proactively with many cities. We have a lot of educational programs. We have very close collaboration with some local city governments, and it's definitely moving to the right direction. But we see that there are places where it's really stopping us from growing. So obviously, we're not stopping, we're not giving up. But this is one of the main barriers that we currently see.
Thanks very much. Then, Phill, tell us, is your system more complex, or more barriers, or easier?
So the barriers is legacy, is status quo. There's always a gravitational pull towards what people know and what people are already familiar with. So we look at, we talk about planes, trains, automobiles, conveyor belts, production lines. They were invented in the last industrial revolution, and we always, and they work, but they're not fit for purpose if we're looking at the future. And the same for cities. I live in London. It's one of the oldest cities in the world. So if we're trying to retrofit MagWay into a London environment, it's much more complex. So in order to introduce our new technology and de-risk it, we're focused on initial smaller systems, less costly systems, as I said, £1.5 million, and then we can prove it and have live KPIs compared to other current modes of transport, and the benefits of MagWay to bring it to market. So that's basically where we are to overcome those barriers which are around regulation and access and rights of way.
So Antonis, for people investing in solutions and trying to help the city space with real progress, what are your concluding thoughts?
Well, I mean, the great risk here is of focusing on the individual trees and missing the forest. And the forest is the climate crisis, and that we need to tackle it. And this is a planetary goal that is, of course, a European goal as well. And in the end of the day, it trickles down to the cities, to the local authorities, metropolitan authorities, regional authorities. And what is needed is for them to understand how they can help towards that as part of a wider system, so that we can all reach this goal. But in order to do that, they need to take into account their local context. So I think that the private sector is there to provide them with the necessary tools to do what they need to do, and also to help them figure out what they need to do. But at the same time, likewise, there needs to be an effort on their part, I think, to understand exactly what they need and how they can contribute to this goal. Once we have reached that, I think that everything else will be much easier.
Thank you, panel. Let's open to the audience for questions, be it on either of the solutions, on your approaches to cities and systematic solutions. Open to any show of hands. Right, we didn't prepare any default questions that we could revert to, but it's probably approaching lunchtime. So I could definitely think of more questions, such as what's going to happen next year. That would be certainly one of them. The other one is sort of the systematic angle. How do you plug things together from people in the room to people on the stage? So I would more than happily invite you to join our lunch table when it's the time to get there. And with that in mind, unless you want to use the minimum time that we have, I think we'll see you during lunch. I think we're out of time, so that will be it.